Welcome to another program in our series, Freethinking Forum. We're starting a series, Voices of Resistance. And I'm Bill Weir, the producer and host, and I'm delighted to have with me my co-host, Samantha Stinson. Is that right? And maybe you've already seen the one I made with Samantha about her candidacy for Minneapolis City Council, but we are so grateful to have with us today Dr. Jill Stein, our Green Party candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, that did so well in being a voice of resistance in this the 2016 campaign. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you. It's really great to be with you, Bill. It's great to be with you, Samantha. It's a real honor.
And how should we begin? Can you give us an update first on the recount effort and that you've undertaken? Tell us why you think it's important to pursue even now.
Yes, since the recount, we've had more and more evidence that we don't have an election system we can trust. A recount is essentially a way to ensure that there's accountability and transparency in our elections so that we have an election system we can trust, which is accurate, secure, and just. It needs to be all of those things. If it's just one of them and not all of them, we got a problem. So, there are many serious gaps in our election system that keep coming to light. And one of the things we've seen so much of since the election is evidence that our elections are being tampered with. And there's been all kinds of evidence about election software companies. All of this adds up to an election system we don't trust. And people have had, serious doubts about this election system for a long time. It's not only the counting of votes, it's also who gets to vote. And we see more and more evidence that people are being wiped off the voter rolls through this system called interstate cross-check and through voter ID laws. Our point in the recount is that we need to work together to be sure that we have an election system we can trust, which is not suppressing voters, which is not striking voters from the voting rolls, and which has a counting system that is accurate. And we continue to see more and more problems in all of those areas. In particular, we are trying to get our hands on the actual voting machines and the software because it's never been examined. When the powers that be tell you that there's, quote, no evidence that our votes are being tampered with, that no evidence is because they haven't looked. They've looked in other places, and everywhere we look, we find evidence of tampering. But the actual voting machine software and the voting machines have never been examined. They need to be. And let me also say this is an issue of racial justice. The U.S. Civil Rights Commission said many years ago that if you are voting in an African American community or in a community of color, the odds that your vote is being thrown away or ignored or messed with go up 900% for being in a community of color. And we have evidence now from the recount that that's going on in the failure of our voting machines as well. We know in Detroit, for example, that some 87 optical scanners, which count our ballots, they failed on election day in communities of color. It makes the point that we need a system which is accurate, secure, and just, and free from Jim Crow. So the recount continues. We have several legal cases that we are pursuing in order to make sure that the voting system is accurate, secure, and just, and we're going to keep going. We're building that movement. It's a movement not just to count the beans and count the ballots. It's a movement for justice in our voting system.
Great. I'm glad you're continuing.
So, Jill, this is a great segue then. Do you think that we're on the verge of a paradigm shift in politics then?
You know, I would say, Samantha, that people like you running for office really indicate that the paradigm has shifted. We have so many awesome community candidates, especially from communities of color, who are really taking the lead in the Green Party right now. I have to say, some of our most powerful and compelling candidates from New York to the West Coast are coming out of the communities of color. It's as if the floodgates have opened, so that we, the people, are now taking back our democracy. We're taking back our political system. I would say the old paradigm has already fallen apart. We see that in the statistics, the polls that tell us 90% of voters have lost confidence in our political system. Some 60% of voters practically are clamoring for a new major third party. During the last presidential race, over 75% of voters were screaming to open up the debates so that people could hear about candidates other than the usual establishment political parties. The two presidential candidates from the Democratic and Republican parties were the most unpopular, distrusted candidates in our history. I think we have a new social and political paradigm and economic paradigm that has already shifted, and the political system is just kind of catching up. And that's the work that candidates like you are doing right now, and I want to encourage everybody to get involved, to adopt a candidate, to help, whether you are in that town or not. You can help by making a contribution. You can help by joining a phone campaign, and if you're in town, you can help with canvassing and so on. So this is on all of us right now to make that paradigm shift happen. We're in a realignment moment. It's really a political storm. People have had it with this political establishment that's throwing them under the bus, and we are rising up as the Green Party, as a politics of, by, and for the people.
Magnificent way you explained that. Now, some people will still say third-party candidate, oh, you're a spoiler vote. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that?
Well, I would point out, for one, that the parties of abolition, that is to abolish the criminal institution of slavery back in the 1800s, they were called spoilers too. Spoiler is in the mind of the beholder. And if you think that a political system that throws us under the bus, that subjects millions of people to unjust incarceration, to police violence, to economic servitude, an entire generation of young people, I might point out, who are basically locked into predatory student loan debt with no way to get out of it, given the lousy, insecure, low-wage jobs that the economy has to offer. If you think that system is a good system, well then, yeah, I guess we who resist the system, we who transform that system, in your mind, I guess that makes us spoilers if you want to protect this system that is sentencing us to economic servitude, to racial injustice and violence, to xenophobia and deportations, to mass migrations, which are the order of the day right now, to endless war, to the offshoring of our jobs, to a climate which is headed for catastrophe, to an ecology which is in meltdown now, in the 6th great extinction, to a nuclear war which is on the verge of breaking out on the Korean Peninsula. If you think this is a good system, you can have it. But there's, I'd say, a strong majority of people who are not being served by this system, who are really being enslaved, who are being abused by this system. We are ready for a new system. So our response to that kind of accusation is to say that it's time to forget the lesser evil, which has basically brought us everything we were afraid of. Forget the lesser evil. It's time to fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do.
Yes, and you've recently been to South Korea as part of a delegation, I understand, and reported back in several forums. What, how can we resolve that crisis in the Korean Peninsula? Are we headed for war?
Under the predatory political system, which serves its big donors, which is an instrument of the military-industrial complex, we are in a very terrifying situation. What we're seeing happening on the Korean Peninsula is the logical endpoint of a system of economic and military domination as the basis of our foreign policy. So it's really important that we seize the moment here. We badly need that paradigm shift. Changing course on the Korean Peninsula is as simple as we the people being heard. And we know that we have the voices of reason if we can actually engage in this conversation. So we're encouraging people to call the White House actually right now. I mean, you can Google that phone number. I don't have it with me at the moment. If you call the White House and leave a message, here's that number, 202-456-1414. Call the White House and give them a simple message. Negotiate, don't escalate with South Korea. I'm sorry, with North Korea. We've been threatening North Korea with sanctions and with military fear-mongering for decades. It hasn't worked. Guess what does work? Negotiation. We've used it successfully with North Korea in the 1990s and during the 2000s. It collapsed basically because the U.S. pulled back from our commitments, our commitment to normalize relations, our commitment to provide alternative energy sources, and so on. We backed off, and when we did, and we also instituted a first nuclear strike policy against North Korea, which had no nuclear weapons at the time. So if we're threatening to drop nuclear bombs on a country, and we've been undertaking these war exercises that rehearse dropping a nuclear bomb on North Korea, we've been doing that at least twice a year, more often now, practically every couple of weeks. We rehearse flying and launching from submarines nuclear bombs onto North Korea. That hasn't worked, but what does work is negotiation. It worked with Iran, it worked during the Cold War, and it has worked before with North Korea. It's time to get the warmongers out of the way at this moment, but also for the long term. That's what the Green Party is about. This is a struggle not only to create a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, which is where we want to go. It's where the people of South Korea want to go. It's about creating a nuclear-free world. And I'll conclude here just mentioning that we in fact now have a global nuclear weapons ban, which was just passed by the majority of nations at the United Nations. Guess who voted against it? The 9 countries who have nuclear weapons. That's a very unstable situation. Most of the world doesn't have nuclear weapons. Everybody's going to get them, and we're going to have Korean crises all over the place unless we rid the world of nuclear weapons. That alone makes the nuclear arms race on the Korean Peninsula ridiculous and also illegal. That's kind of the elephant in the room here, that the policy we're pursuing is actually illegal. So the South Korean people are very clear about what we need to do, how we need to go forward. They're not afraid of North Korea. Now it happens they speak Korean, so they really understand what is being said by North Korea. We get stuff through a filter. That filter is the regime change filter. Regime change didn't work so well for us in the Middle East. Now throw in nuclear weapons and the great powers, that is Russia and China, and we really have a prescription for a disaster. So it's time to get the message through to the leaders in Washington, D.C., and there are some of them who actually get that this is a non-starter. We can't go there. It's not going to be a confined war if it goes nuclear. And it's really important for people to understand that we're all at risk. If we have a regional nuclear war, it kicks up so much dust and debris into the atmosphere that we lose enough sunlight around the world. It's called nuclear winter, and our food production goes way down. There will be mass starvation of at least hundreds of millions of people. So don't think like, oh, it's just a war over there, like Lindsey Graham is saying, the senator, the good Republican senator, I say in a qualified way, who's been so outspoken as a warmonger here in Korea. He says, if we have a war, it'll be over there, no worries. Well, sorry, Lindsey, that war is coming home. As all wars eventually come home, we're paying for these wars. The war at home already, the war abroad already has a war at home, which is taking away our food and our jobs and our schools and our health care. You know, over half of our discretionary budget at home is going into that war machine. So we need a change here in the long and intermediate range, but we need an immediate change right now. Remember, when back in, when was it? I think it was 2012, I want to say, that the U.S. was going to first start bombing Syria. And we, the people, rose up and we told our congressmen and our senators in no uncertain terms, we are not going to war in Syria. And we actually stopped it. It was a moment where we were galvanized into getting organized. And you know, the way they proposed it, the way Obama proposed it, resistance is futile. Don't even bother. You know, we're going to war. We're going to bomb Syria. And we, the people, stood up and we said, no how, no way. We're not going to war. We stopped it. We need to do that again. We need to really mobilize now, like our lives depend on it. Because if there's war on the Korean Peninsula, it's going to be very hard to contain that war. And the odds are very frightening that this could become a regional nuclear war very quickly that will sink the whole ship. So really important for us to stand up now and to stop it. It's as simple as doing what has worked before, and that is to negotiate, don't escalate. That simple. Call the White House now, and again, that number is 202-456-1414. It's in our hands.
That is a magnificent statement to help us save the world from a war that would bring on nuclear winter, starvation of millions. Thank you, Jill. You put it so well.
Well, and Bill, not to mention the lives that would be lost by our American soldiers, where we see time and time again where these young folks. I lost my best friend while we were in Afghanistan before she was even of legal drinking age. So these are real concerns that we have, not only on that global scale, but also talking about locally, losing our children to this unnecessarily.
Exactly. And there are about 30,000 U.S. soldiers in South Korea right now, and they are very much at risk if there is an outbreak of hostilities.
Absolutely.
We have to stop this before it gets started.
Now we have about 9 minutes left. What is the other? I mean, I can't imagine a bigger crisis than what you just talked about. But how can we change things? Are there some Green Party candidates ready to be elected? One is sitting right next to me here, but.
Exactly. One of our wonderful candidates who really deserves national exposure, Samantha Stinson, who is a fabulous candidate for city council and who potentially has a winnable race. You have ranked choice voting there in Minneapolis, so there's no excuse for fear-based voting. There's no excuse for voting for the lesser evil, and I have to say there's no excuse for Greens to sit on the sidelines here and to just let somebody else do the work. It's really more critical than ever that we begin to win these local races and show that Greens don't just have the right ideas, we actually have the right organizing, we have the people who can actually stand up and be the elected leaders that we need. Samantha is one wonderful example. What's so exciting is that we've got an incredible crop of candidates who really are ready, more ready than Democrats and Republicans, simply because we're not bribed into being servants of the status quo, which the other political parties are, unfortunately. And even the reform efforts that we hear about in the Democrats, somehow they can't get it past the DNC. And they put up a good reform candidate, and he gets shot down by Obama's institutional banker-friendly candidate, Tom Perez, who wins the DNC. The DNC cannot even ban corporate money. The Democratic Party cannot manage to get behind single payer at a moment when Obamacare is melting down, and when the Republicans, are also melting down in their effort to try to kill Obamacare, the little that we have. The Democrats, 60% of Democrats in the House, by the way, supported a bigger military budget than Donald Trump himself. So the Democrats, they can scream about the Republicans, but where are they in standing up for what we need? That's what the Greens are about. That's why the Democrats are so, what shall we say, running scared right now and very frightened of us Greens, and working overtime to try to smear the voices of Green leadership right now, because they know that they are losing their traction. So it's really important for us to stand up. Here are some other of the amazing candidates. Seth Caperdale is running for governor in New Jersey. He's actually a minister who's been very involved in creating alternative jobs, creating housing for the homeless, doing deportation defense. He's actually managed to get the deportation orders reversed for a whole slew of family members, and very active in mobilizing an interfaith coalition against deportations, against mass incarceration. Just a really wonderful, supremely qualified candidate. And again, that's Seth Caperdale. He's one of two governor races this year across the country. That? Elizabeth Dickinson. I want to mention Elizabeth, who's running for mayor in St. Paul. Another really powerful candidate, the only woman in an otherwise man's race who has the endorsement of the Sierra Club and other groups as well. Important to get behind her. Hakeem Browder, who has led the coalition to shut down Rikers Prison. His brother was a very sad suicide victim after being incarcerated for 3 years on suspicion of having stolen a backpack. He was incarcerated in Rikers Prison. That's Hakeem Browder, who is running for mayor of New York City. James Lane running for public advocate. Howie Hawkins running for Syracuse mayor. The list goes on, more than I can say. But this is a really critical time. The rubber's hitting the road here, folks, whether it's on jobs, whether it's on police violence in your community, whether it's on student debt that you can't get out of. The Greens have the solutions to all of this. It's not rocket science. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We've got the power. It's all about having the courage of our convictions, standing up and using that power to put these solutions to work and create an America and a world that works for all of us. The power to create that world really is in our hands, and it starts right here and now with candidates like Samantha Stimson.
Well, Samantha, you've got an endorsement. And another endorsement, I should say.
Thank you, Jill.
Jill, that was magnificently showing that it's not just a one-shot president of the United States kind of thing. It's across the country now. And
it never was a one-shot, because Greens have been running and winning local offices, like Cam Gordon on the City Council of Minneapolis, who's been doing such a heroic job of standing up for living wages and social justice and against police violence. we Greens, we've had over 1,000 Greens holding local offices, and we run thousands of Greens regularly. So that myth is part of the fear campaign and the smear campaign against Greens, because the political establishment knows that we're coming, we're strong, get ready world. We're about to save the future together.
Oh, I'm so glad that something made you enter the political arena. What were your takeaways from the so far for you personally, as well as for the Green Party?
My takeaway for the Greens and for our message, and this is a lesson that not only I learned, but other Greens have learned. When we are able to get to the microphone, we win the debate. We always win the debate because we actually are the only national political party that is not hijacked, that's not poisoned by corporate money. So we have the unique ability to actually speak for what it is that the American people are clamoring for an emergency jobs program to solve both the economic crisis and the climate crisis in one fell swoop, a Green New Deal, for abolishing student debt. We bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who crashed the economy. It's time to bail out the victims. We can do that. Instead of spending $1 trillion on a new generation of nuclear weapons, which is what Barack Obama created, this program, instead of $1 trillion on a generation of nuclear weapons, let's spend $1 trillion on a generation of young people and create a livable world and get young people out of debt. We can create health care as a human right through Medicare for all. We can make public higher education free. It pays for itself 7-to-1. We can end police violence with community-based policing, with basically police review boards that are controlled by communities. Communities should control our police, not the other way around. We can end mass incarceration. We can legalize marijuana and treat all drug use as a health issue, not as a criminal issue. And we can create a foreign policy based on international law and human rights, not on military and economic domination, which is bankrupting us while it's making us less secure and has brought us to the verge of nuclear war. We're at a point where we have to change. It's not just can we change, we have to change. So with the courage of our convictions, we can completely change that paradigm and create an America and a world that works for all of us. That's what I learned by running for office, that people are ready. The communications and corporate media tries to shut us down, as do the corporate political parties. But the people are ready. It's all about getting the word out. We can win this together.
Thank you, Dr. Jill Stein, for being with us and being so eloquent in this wonderful half hour. Samantha, do you have a comment at the end here?
It's just a wonderful time to be green, and I want to reinforce something that Jill said, and that when you join the Green Party, you're leading the charge. Nobody's telling you what to do. They are trusting you and what you know, boots on the ground for your area, to lead the charge, and they're there to support you. Not to tokenize you, not to minimalize you, or to throw you out on the margins. They're there to put you on the front stage and support you so that you can support everyone else.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank
you, Samantha, for being the living example of what green candidates look like, sound like, and inspire in the 21st century. Thanks for leading the charge.
You got it.
So, thank you, Samantha, too.